Hey everybody, this is Becca Heyman and you're watching First Line Frenzy Live. Elizabeth Everett will be our special guest today. She is the author of A Perfect Equation, a historical romance that I personally loved. It's the second book in the Secret Scientists of London series, and it's amazing. So she'll be on soon. We're going to look at about 12 first lines today, give our critiques. Oop, I see that Elizabeth is here, and so I am going to invite her to join me. Once again, praying for technology to function. We'll see how that goes. Uh, Hopefully that works. Hey!
Hi,
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fine. It snowed 2 inches and now it's like spring outside. It's very apocalyptic out there, but in a good way, so it's fine.
That's it. That's actually upstate New York weather. That's
Yeah. Well, I'm outside of Boston, so
sorry.
yeah, it's okay. How's it going?
It's going well. We're just gonna cross our fingers here. I'm sorry, my hair is being a jerk, so don't look at me. But
I feel that as a fellow curly girl, it's like a daily, I always say it's more like having a pet than a hairstyle because like you just don't know.
it's very much actually. So that's my pet. We're speaking of an actual pet. We're just gonna cross our fingers here that my dog does not try to protect me from garbage bins and rabbits the way she did last night when I was doing a live event and she lost her mind. And there was no one in the house, right? Like I love it when there's no one in the house because I'm like, bye, because nobody walks in when I'm talking with other authors about, I don't know, because I write romance, sex, and a child will pop their head in. What's face sitting? So then I get into, so
During COVID, I have young kids. I have a 3-year-old and an 8-year-old, and so during COVID, my 3-year-old was even younger and couldn't go to preschool yet, and obviously preschools were open, and so we had a lovely nanny who would come like a few mornings a week and sit with her and play with her while I did worky things. And I was on a call once with a romance author, and we had to talk about when to splice in the penetrative sex, and it was like a 40-minute conversation about like what is the buildup and like is oral, what are we doing? And I at one point was like sweating because I was like, am I sexually harassing our nanny by exposing her to this conversation? And I had to apologize after. I was like, sorry, it's the job. And she was like, sounds like a neat job. I was like, yeah, it's not bad. So here we are. So I get it. Yeah, no, I totally, I feel you.
good times.
Good times. Was your event with Kate Pembroke last night?
It was, yes.
How was it?
It was great. I really enjoy Kate as a person. We met, there's a lot of authors that I met through debut groups. So I know there's a lot of writers who are watching today. And I have to say that was the most wonderful part of being a debut author, is forming these connections with other debut authors. So we weren't at sea alone, we were at sea together, drowning the group. Yeah. But what came out of it was I'm in a very close group with other romance authors, but is what comes out of building community with other authors at the same stage that you are in is that there's an extension of hands, there's a paying forward that is so fulfilling and so important, because this is a job like any other job. We make professional contacts, we network, we collaborate, sometimes we co-write, we pass along information that we wouldn't otherwise get in an unfiltered form, and we make friends. We make friends who understand our particular situation, which doesn't always happen. So for any aspiring writers out there, or fledgling writers, I have to say joining a writing community was the best thing I ever did, and will be one of the best things that you ever do. It's just invaluable on so many fronts, and especially during the pandemic, it made things so much more bearable.
Yeah, I mean, my work is obviously very isolated and isolating. I'm a freelance book editor. And so I've worked alone in my home for the last 14 years. You know, I've never gone into an office to work. And I've always sought out other freelance editors to trade critiques with and keep each other sharp and talk about how do you deal with this situation, and what if I feel such and such a way about a manuscript, but I need to recapture the objectivity. And it's very important to be in the trenches with someone who understands your experience. And I love that. You know, I've worked with, you know, many debut authors who end up in that debut class, you know, and they read each other's books and they hype each other up and they support each other. And it's wonderful. I mean, I think that's how you sort of establish that long-term artistic community. And I think it's great. And, you know, I love that. I love that for you.
So I think everyone should do it. But that's how I met Kate. And we're sort of the same age, of similar circumstances. But she writes Regency.
Mm-hmm.
And it's more in the traditional vein, but it's very smart. Her writing is I find it very crisp and precise. Mm-hmm. And which was interesting because when I spoke with her last night, it turns out she's a pantser. And for those of you who don't know, there's
plotters and pantsers.
There's people who plot their novels out and people who sit down and they have, whether it's a song or a scene or a character in their head, they sit down and they just begin their story. And I am a plotter. I use index cards. I like to have my plot figured out first before my characters come. And she is the opposite. But I was surprised that she is the opposite because everything, the way she writes, it seems so thoughtful, and not in a ponderous way, but just in a kind of very precise way. So it was an interesting conversation to have. Right. It was supposed to be about unconventional heroines, and it kind of devolved into like shop talk, like writing process talk.
I'm sure no one minded. That's always fun. Shop talk is great. I'm working on a project right now, and I was having trouble sort of wrangling the timeline. And so I actually went into my, you know, infographic software that I use to make all of my, you know, first line frenzy graphics and things like that. And I made a calendar for the 2 weeks, you know, the 2 weeks that my ticking clock is ticking. And it has been so helpful to just like, almost like keeping a diary for my characters, to just write out what happens day to day. I think most authors and a lot of writers that I work with don't realize how much plot density is required to fill a novel of a conventional length. And so they think they've had all of these great ideas, scene by scene, great. And then they get to the writing and it's maybe 30,000 or 40,000 words. And the density of intention and the density of plot just isn't there. And so a lot of that has to do with weak conflict, of course, and antagonism and internal antagonism. But it's always so interesting, I think, to set it out chronologically, to figure out like where are the pressure points and where's the tension and where's the release of that tension, you know, and just to sort of place all of those items in a special way. For me, on a calendar, I've always kept a paper calendar. I can't get behind Outlook or like I just can't. I don't know why. I actually have a 5-year calendar just because I need to know. I need to know what day of the week, you know, September 13th is in 2024. And so, you know, I got that 5-year calendar going, and that's what I offered my characters was their 2-week calendar, and it has been super helpful. So
that sounds actually very helpful, especially if you're doing, say, a thriller or something where you have hours and you want to keep track of what's happening, in which, if you set yourself 24 hours in which the story is told, then yeah, you have to rather be doing it chapter by chapter. I can see you doing hour by hour or day by day. So
I think also when you write romance, and if you write, you know, open door romance, I think you have to sort of look at this timeline and say, what is a believable trajectory for intimacy between these two characters? Can we get to the whole enchilada in a believable time frame where it's sexy and consensual and emotional and supports the narrative in a meaningful way? And, you know, that was also, I was sort of meditating this morning on whether this one scene, it was too soon for more, and how much, and what does that mean for the rest of the tension in the novel. And, you know, for me, I rely so heavily on my calendar. I was like, why don't you have this for your characters? And so now I do.
Yeah, I have to say that when I do my index card plotting, I do always, that is along with conflict and along with resolution and along with first act, sort of those little pinpoints, absolutely uh, intimacy, beginning, getting there. And those are also charted before I even write the book. So I
Yeah.
know, and it's not that, once you start writing, your characters do whatever it is they're going to do. They don't really ask you. They're like, well, guess what? I'm not going to kiss until chapter 10.
Very badly behaved.
They don't always listen. So sometimes that gets blown away. But with that in mind, with my skeleton in mind when I sit down to write, I find it easier than to really focus on those characters and the way they speak and the way they look, and because I feel like everything else has been taken care of.
Yeah. Well, and I think especially, I thought that was actually really well done in here. The buildup, I think, especially when you're writing historical romance, there's an element of most of these women, a majority of the women that we see in historical romance are either virgins or very close to. Their innocence is obviously a commodity that is being traded on the marriage mart. And so determining a woman's relationship to her own body and to, how she allocates the resources of that body, given the restrictions of the time frame and the time period, is also important. I thought you did a great job of that. Obviously, I think, Letty and Gray are just super charming and lovely, and I have more to say about them. And I have one of my favorite quotes in the book also marked, which I will share at a certain time.
I will say, though, that I dislike having to write a virgin heroine, which is something to think about when you are writing historical romance, because obviously a lot of people get a kick out of A Perfect Equation, the second book, because they never do it in a bed. And my thing is, so with historical romance, I like to keep one toe in history. So as much as, yes, there would probably not ever going to be secret laboratories for women scientists in London, like, given.
We want to believe there were, but
I am not going to ignore the reality of the time, because I am fascinated by the reality of the time and how women of the time dealt with it. And the fact of the matter is that although Letty is sexually experienced, she is unmarried. And she comes from a certain class. She doesn't come from the upper classes. She comes from the mercantile class. She has certain restrictions placed upon her. There is no way, in no sort of iteration, is she just going to go, are they going to find themselves in a bedroom alone, she and a Viscount? It's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. Yeah.
So I have to be thoughtful of that. And I think that, especially because I write historical rom-coms, in a sense, there's a lot of comedy in my book. There's a little bit of a wink to the reader oftentimes, like, we know, okay, we're pushing the boundaries here a little bit, but I do a lot of research, and it is historically accurate, it's scientifically accurate, and I do try and be respectful overall of things that everyone acknowledges. And one of the things that everyone acknowledges is that young women, whether society at large knew the state of their virginity or not, were to be protected. That virginity was to be protected. This is a holdover from medieval times. It is a commodity. It does mean that whatever children you have with her are going to truly be your, I mean, there's so much to unpack about it.
It's very loaded. Yeah.
Which is, again, just why it doesn't appeal to me to equate the state of your hymen with the worth of your character. That I find that very unappealing.
Well, and certainly Letty has this very, I don't want to give any spoilers, but she has an identity crisis based on making a decision about how to use her body and with whom to use her body. And society really comes for her because of that. And it's one of those things where she's not a virgin, but in some ways the mask has been removed, and she sees that commodity that she was told equates to so much of her personal value actually had nothing to do with her personal value at all. It was about how other people could leverage her value in society. And then once that leverage is gone, what use do they have for her? And I found that her finding her own sense of purpose and her own sense of agency was such a wonderful and nuanced exploration through the whole book, because that's real trauma. You know, believing something your whole life, having it very abruptly and unceremoniously revealed as untrue, and then being basically kicked to the curb as a result is really traumatic. And for her to have the bravery and the wherewithal to know herself again, and to continue to learn who she is despite that sort of unbalancing, I thought was just really compelling.
Thanks. And she would have done it on her own, but the way she did it was in conjunction with, it was through this healthy relationship with a man, because she's heterosexual, and he was the physical relationship was consensual, which is huge, but he did not get in her way, and he was not the agent of her change. He was the catalyst, and he supported it. And for me, when a romance does that, you have to be careful, because you don't want to be pedantic. You don't want to be like, I hit people over the head with. You want it to be organic, and you want it to be romantic. But when it works, it really works. You just feel really good about romance and what it's saying, and that particular romance. And as a writer, I feel really good about what I'm putting out in the world. So, but it's hard to do. I have to say, it's hard to do, because we've internalized as women, like the same thing that Letty did. We've internalized a lot of things about sex. We've internalized a lot of things about women being women and writing women. That's just not going to go anywhere anytime soon. So you want to be thoughtful, but you don't want to be pushy, but you don't want to, I don't know. There's a lot that goes into it. So, and in the end too, it is a comedy, like it's a romantic comedy. So you don't want to
you don't want to like overload the heavy, you know?
No. We already have a good time here.
It's a great segue. I'm gonna bring up our lines.
Okay.
For everyone tuning in, I'm gonna review the first line frenzy rules. The rule is these are gut reactions. I post a first line frenzy pretty much every day, and we're always looking for character and conflict in a first line. And then sort of secondary to all that, voice, and of course, mechanics. There's a variety of genres here. I haven't really taken a close look at these. I just sort of copy paste them from my master list. And so maybe there will be surprises. I don't know. I'm going to try to flip my camera without showing you my extremely dirty kitchen. So you can look at my wine rack, which is clean. There we go. And then I'm going to flip, and then you'll see we're very high tech. Okay. I just put you in front of my laptop with very large letters. Let me adjust this a little bit. Okay. Someday I'll be less of a Luddite and it will be better. But this is where we are today. So, okay. I think this is probably as good as it's gonna.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you see?
Yeah.
Okay. There.
Okay.
I'll bring it up a little bit. Okay. So this is from an adult general commercial fiction, and it says, I was a good little girl, except when I couldn't keep the monsters quiet.
That is wow. That is very visceral. That hit me like full on.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's an adult commercial fiction too. It's like, this is not fantasy. Something is happening here.
Yeah, it's very ominous, right? Like it gives me a big uh-oh vibe. Like, first of all, I think it's probably, I can't decide. No, I don't think it's a prologue. I do think it's chapter 1. I think it nicely establishes that the voice is retrospective. You know, we have what we hope is the adult version of this person who has survived whatever is about to happen to her, and is now, you know, going to tell us about it. It is very visceral. I think it's really, it's quite compelling.
I think the only thing I would say is take out little, because if you're a girl, you're little.
Yep, always already little. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I do think, unless there's an off chance that that's language that's coming to her from an adult, But beyond that, I think you're right. I mean, girl is always already a little implied.
Yeah.
I think that's very good. So one of the things I forgot to mention is if you see a favorite as we go down, you want to scribble down the number because the author of our favorite line of the day gets a copy of A Perfect Equation. So as we go, just maybe, give me your top, and then we can always review them. We can always come back. Okay. So the next one is an adult romance. Huzzah. Dread fills me as I ask my boss to repeat himself because I can't have possibly heard him right. So I'm just going to say, first of all, it's
there's too many words.
It's many words to say a very basic thing. But we would want to say can't possibly have heard because we're going to keep the transitive verb closer to this verb. So have heard, right? This is our verb phrase. So just like we don't love splitting infinitives, we don't want to split a verb phrase unnecessarily.
Okay.
Anyway,
you're saying
the boring part.
Fancy way.
I know.
I like that. It's too many words. You're like, I'll tell you why.
Oh, let me tell you why. Sometimes I do the complete word breakdown. What I really love is counting the adverbs. Then people really start to want to crawl under a table. Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to say this, just gut reaction as because I've been reading, now that I finished the revisions for my last book, I've been reading to try and write reviews. I would like, if dread is filling you, boom, then you say why. I would have liked to see this in 2 sentences. Dread fills me as, what? Okay. You know what? Don't even ask him to repeat himself. Dread fills me as my boss repeats himself. I can't possibly have heard. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I think for me, I guess this creates a very small amount of tension where we're like, ooh, what did he say? What is the thing? But I guess I'm more likely to be interested in just learning the thing.
What did he say? You know,
right.
What did he say?
Like, don't beat around the bush.
Then you have the reaction.
Exactly. Like, I think the reaction and the impetus, the cause of the reaction, can be artfully combined in a single sentence that draws us in much faster. I don't know where this person works. I don't know anything about this other than it's very vague. It's very vague. And so I would love to see a real conflict, right? Or we're being told about a conflict instead of being shown the conflict itself. And so just show the damn conflict. Get it on the page. We don't need to beat around the bush. That's mine.
I really want to just if you hit me with the first line, if the first line is you're fired, then you're right. Like your eyeballs are on it, right?
Yeah.
And then the person can be filled with glee or filled with dread or filled with whatever.
Because what if it's a promotion but they have anxiety? Well, then I want to see like the familiar sweat breaks out along, the length of my spine when my boss tells me what he thinks is good news. I've been promoted, Well, there you go. So I feel like there's just get us right into the moment instead of staying on the perimeter of the moment. The narrative voice here is just too far from the action for moi. Ooh, a fantasy. Okay. You can tell because there are so many words. Enigma sits behind his solid oak desk, flipping through a book about the Feral clans as a warm summer breeze blows through the large windows behind him when he hears Elvi's footsteps rush to the office doors.
Okay, so I'm going to say that especially for a fantasy, because those books are about 100 and whatever. They're really long books.
Really long, yeah.
You're building a whole world. At the same time, your reader is the same reader who's reading all sorts of genres, right? This is a case where, especially with fantasy, where I recommend reading aloud or using one of those services that read aloud your book back to you. Because you can hear, once you started reading it, I could hear all of the places where I needed it to stop. not just thin it, but to stop, pause,
Mm-hmm.
take in, stop, pause, take in. Every time you, for me at least, and again, I am not, I just, I only started writing like about 6 years ago, fiction. Before
Mm-hmm.
that, I wrote grant proposals, which have to carry a message very directly. So I'm sort of, that's where my mind goes. You're giving the reader so much information in this, and you're not giving them a break to take it in, and it's your first line.
Yeah.
Makes sense
I
to you?
it absolutely makes sense. I think one of the things you're probably responding to is that this is a lot of words to say nothing about these characters. So what we're doing is spending, so I talk often in First Line Frenzy about heavy lifting and high value real estate, right? We want our first line to do a lot of heavy lifting, but it is a very precious real estate. There's not a ton of it. How much of this sentence, here I will show you, has to do with just where Enigma is sitting. Here it is. It's what is that? Like 60% of the sentence to describe someone sitting still and hearing someone else approach. That is 0% exciting. I think this is probably the right scene to start, but most assuredly the wrong entry point. And so get us past all of this. No one cares about the solid oak desk. Who cares if it's oak or maple or cherry, unless it's made of razors? I don't see why this is a relevant detail for line one. Flipping through a book, that's very casual. He's not like there's just nothing super exciting or compelling about this scene. So for all we know, Elvi rushes all the time. There's no urgency to rushing footsteps. Maybe this is just someone who generally likes to scurry about. So
Right.
again, I think you have to enter in a moment of change or emotional impact or physical impact, as opposed to, just sitting still, flipping through the old bookaroo about feral clans.
And I think too, like in fantasy, you have time to put those details in.
Oh yeah.
You have time to drop us in your world. You have all the time in the world, because when we read fantasy, we're expecting.
Mm-hmm.
We need to know where we are and how many different limbs you have and like what your spell capacity is. But you also need to hook us.
Yeah,
So,
it's character first. No one's going to read a book just for the world necessarily, right? I mean, it's character first and foremost always in every genre, and conflict second, and everything else afterwards. So I think this is probably, again, the right scene, but I would recommend fast forwarding about 15 minutes and seeing where you are in that moment and maybe starting there. This is adult thriller suspense. I just listened to, have you read anything by Karen Slaughter?
yes, I have.
I just listened to False Witness, and my blood pressure is still high, and I finished it days ago. It was so stressful and like incredibly compelling, unputdownable, but also it was one of those books that I wanted it to be over, but I also wanted it to last longer. I don't know. I don't usually read adult thriller suspense because I'm too much of a baby. So I usually read YA thrillers, and that's just my correct speed. But let's see what we have here. I'm going to try to get all these words on the page. Okay. It smells like Burbank. The stale aroma of smog, sun-baked backyard pools, and Mexican restaurants hang heavy in the air. Oh, already we have 2 sentences here. Friends, this is a comma splice. We cannot just put a comma where we need a period to be because we want to put more words on the page for First Line Frenzy. That's breaking the rules, but we're here now, so let's keep going. Pushed by a steady wind from the Hollywood Pass, all held in place by a compressed inversion layer, a virtual convection oven, this hot April day.
Right. So I'm in Burbank. Now I know what Burbank smells like, and I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. It smells like Burbank. What? Like that first line, actually,
It's great.
It's great.
It's great.
And then you tell me you don't need to, like, I also think the rest of that is maybe 2 sentences, or you don't even actually need all of you just need to say a virtual convection oven, or because it's California, where we already know like it's hot and gross because
yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yep.
But it smells like Burbank, and then you tell me what Burbank smells like. Yeah. That's you've got me.
Yeah. I
You don't
even think
stop.
the stale aroma is probably overkill. I think we can just move into smog, sun-baked
Yeah,
backyard pools and Mexican restaurants, like perfume the air or something like that. I think
yeah,
there's a more elegant way to say what's here. These are all great observations, but trying to cram them all into a single sentence is a mistake.
yeah.
I want to say that It Smells Like Burbank is a great first line. It obviously doesn't have a character directly in it, but I do feel like there's enough voice here to bridge the gap. And of course, there's no conflict in that sentence either. But there's something really appealing about, I don't know, a
Yeah, it's
place
just
having
because
this
Burbank.
distinctive aroma.
It's not like It Smells Like Paris. You're gonna be like, oh my god.
Yeah,
No.
like of all the places, Burbank.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, exactly. It's so innocuous, but great
Yeah,
that
it's
it
really
works.
unique. I'm quite fond of it. Yeah. Okay. Well, you shot yourself in the foot here because unfortunately what's on here is a lot of extra, but we like this part, author, if you're tuning in. Okay.
Yeah.
Moving along, another romance. I may have stacked the deck with some romance, given given your penchant. If
Okay.
a few years ago you were to stop me on the street and show me a glimpse of what my life would look like today, I'd say, you've got the wrong guy. Yeah. Well, the silence is loud,
I think I know what they're trying to do. But it almost feels like it's coming at it there should be something before it. Like,
Well, it's a big cliche, to be honest. I mean,
okay,
this for me, I don't like, so what? I don't the action doesn't start a few years ago. It's starting now, and I guess the book is either about what happened to get from point A to Z,
right.
or it's about starting where we are and moving forward and maybe things falling apart. But
Yeah.
none of that is here. I mean, I don't love direct address in a first line either, unless this is something that's going to continue through the entire book. Direct address, my friends, is this right here, where we address the reader directly.
Okay. I just learned something.
Usually direct address is when we name a character, like, yes, Elizabeth, that is correct.
Right.
But in it's sort of this like second person almost,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a little awkward for me. I guess there's nothing here to connect to. I don't know who you are. I don't know what your situation was. If it was a few years ago when I was living under the bridge,
Right.
I couldn't have imagined the high-rise view outside my penthouse that was just a few years away, whatever. I think then there's something a little bit more compelling.
There's something to hold on to. So like when I think of a hook, I think like it's something that my brain catches hold of. It smells like Burbank, right? So my brain caught hold of Burbank. Wow. And my brain wanted to carry me forward. There's no like nugget in this for me to hook onto that wants to carry me forward. So like, yeah, like you said, like, as I sat under a bridge, oh dude, why is this guy sitting under a bridge? My brain is hooked forward. But that piece, like I said, it feels to me as if this comes after something else. Like you have to tell me why your life has changed so much.
Yeah. And I think this is there's a little bit of voice here, like a very tiny glimmer echo of voice with maybe this is a natural pessimist perhaps, or someone who's a little skeptical of his good fortune. But this is just, I don't think there's really something to save from this specific sentence. I think you have to show us more instead of telling us. I think this is the theme of the day, right? Show, don't tell. It's the theme of life, but here we are.
It's hard. It's super hard.
I also threw in a few historicals because this is obviously your area of expertise. She put her helmet on without haste. As the whistling sound of the second shell approached, then scanned across the surgical ward tent as all 37 patients lay helplessly.
Okay, so the first thing I'm going to say is it's too much passive voice.
Mm-hmm.
It's way too passive. So, and that kind of stuff. The other thing I'm going to say is stuff like the passive voice. When you're doing a first draft, if this is a first draft, fine. Because when, at least for me, when I'm doing the first draft of anything, I have to get the ideas out. I have to set the scene. And then I go back and I take out the extra words and I take out the passive voice.
So when you say passive voice here, are you talking about,
like the patients are laying like passive, like not technically she was putting on the earth that but she put her helmet on with
so
she found her helmet.
I see what you're saying, which is there's not enough subjects doing verbs.
Yeah.
I know some sticklers listening are going to say, well, passive voice is when our verbs do our nouns instead of our nouns doing our verbs. And this sentence is not exactly guilty of that. But there's a lot happening around the protagonist who only gets a pronoun. And there's very little, she's not being an active participant in this moment.
Right.
Yeah. And so she herself is a passive subject, and that's not working.
And also,
I think
without
this
haste is like, that's, I don't know.
This is also the syntax, which is the order of the words in the sentence, is very clunky. This right here, without haste, why not choose a more powerful verb than put, right? She crammed her helmet on as the whistle of a second shell approached.
Well, she's doing it without haste, so that's but it takes you, so that's interesting, but it takes you a while to take in all those words to understand that actually she's maybe not concerned by these.
Oh, you're right. Look at that. See, I read it thinking anyone who hears the whistle of another shell is going to go ahead and get their helmet on with some urgency. But maybe that's the point, is that she's not urgent. That doesn't really make sense to me. See, now we have a logic puzzle, which is why would someone in charge of 37 patients not try to preserve her own self so that she can help others? This whole thing is another sentence, right?
Yeah.
I think this is an interesting moment to enter, right? It's a moment of literal impact. Yeah, it's very interesting. There's a lot happening. We know that she's going to have to take action, but I think, it's not, the execution just isn't there for me. This isn't quite elegant enough to capture my interest.
And again, read it out, read those lines out loud to yourself, especially, so I'm going to say to querying writers, right? If you're trying to get an agent, for example, you're going to send them the first 10 pages usually of your manuscript. So or sometimes 5 pages, it really depends on the agent. So you have so little time, so little space, and actually it's not even like they usually read them, like usually one of their interns reads them. So
yeah.
If you're going to get their attention, if you want them to ask for more, it's so important that that first page is perfectly polished. And I say reading it out loud, not even in your head to yourself, but reading it out loud. It could be that the writer was just writing, do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not sure why they say she put her helmet without haste.
I know, I think it's a mistake. I think obviously reading aloud is a really big component of hearing your work, not only because so there's like this interesting science behind reading, and the part of your brain that lights up when you read silently is different from the part of your brain that lights up when you read aloud. And so it actually gives you a different opportunity to experience your work in a new way. I recommend that when my clients are at the proofreading stage or the line editing stage of writing, that they actually read aloud to themselves from the last sentence backward, to remove all context from each sentence, to look at each sentence on an individual level, like we do right here on First Line Frenzy. And so manipulating your language with your voice, with someone else's voice, with speech reading software is you're giving yourself more opportunities to experience your own work with something like objectivity, which is awfully hard to come by when you've poured your heart and soul and time and energy into a project like this. So I think, again, this seems like the right moment, but the execution is wonky. I would also say your number one job as a writer, other than writing, is reading. And so I would almost say some of the pitfalls of this sentence could likely be ironed out if you were getting better input from the published book side. I tend to believe that reading experience can sometimes like iron out some of these things that are just sort of clunky. I think when you fill yourself with really good prose, you know, when you read good books, you internalize a lot of that good syntax. And so I think there's some work to do there. We have a very rare unicorn, which is a middle grade novel, middle grade fantasy. Theo never imagined he'd spend his 13th birthday far from home fighting demons in Dragon Village. Anytime we have a verb tense change, right? Never imagined to fighting. This is progressive, see that ing? So we need a comma to indicate a verb tense change within a sentence. That was the boring part. Go ahead.
I'm going to say Theo spent his 13th birthday far from home fighting fighting demons in Dragon Village. So take out the never imagined. Because all of a sudden you're like, dude, what's going on with Theo? He's got to fight some demons.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, there's less anxiety. This is a lower angst version of that.
And then you can say he was still in his pajamas, having been yanked from bed by a whatever fairy or whatever it is that's going to happen. Yeah. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it absolutely does. I think especially for middle grade.
Yeah.
The way young readers connect to protagonists is very different from how adult readers connect to protagonists. I have a middle grade reader, and we just started the Mysterious Benedict Society last night. And I think first paragraph, maybe even first line, we learn that the protagonist is 11 years old. Of course, my son is instantly rolling through every beloved protagonist that was 11 years old at the start of the term. He's so excited to become 11, to turn 11. It's going to be so disappointing. But, you know, I think this hits a lot of what is required of a middle grade narrative. And I think it's a good enough line. It's hard to get pumped about middle grade fantasy because it has to be so utilitarian for young readers. And so, you know, I tend to feel it's, you know, it's a little hard to get your party hat on about this, but it's an inoffensive sentence. And I think it's very good for what it is. But I like your edit to eliminate the never imagined. Who cares if he could never imagined it? He's there.
Yeah.
Ooh, look at this. Okay, adult fantasy. Got a little fantasy run here. All right. Let's see if I can not butcher this. Odion Biobaku stared at the kitchen knife in his hand and wondered if murdering his twin brother was the answer to his problem.
Okay. I think, okay. Can you take out the last name and we find out his name has last name later, because that's too much.
Is that too much?
Yeah. Take out the last name.
I think it's too much. I agree with you. It's too much. I think it's because of the intimacy here.
Right.
I think we're in the man's body. We're in his mind already. And so even though this is obviously third person limited, maybe omniscient, we don't know, but it's likely third person limited for the narrative modality. I think the last name might be a little too distant based on the closeness of the rest of the sentence. I quite like this.
I like it too. I like it too. I think the only thing I'd say is, again, this is just me. Onion stared at the kitchen knife in his hand, period.
Hmm.
Would murdering his twin brother solve the answer to his problem?
Yeah.
Or was murdering his twin brother the answer?
If anything, I would do it I would get to the same place, but in a different way. Because then, I mean, it's just staring at a knife in your hand.
Yeah.
He could be
Yeah,
about
yeah,
to cut
yeah,
a steak,
yeah, yeah.
you know? And
Or
so I
stared at the
think,
knife. Yeah, someone said in his hand, take out in his hand.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Kitchen
Angela,
knife.
thank you. Yeah, so Odeon wondered if murdering his twin brother was the answer to his problem.
Yeah. And then
I might even love to see more specificity here to the problem of blank, right? Maybe. I don't know. It depends on what the problem is. If it can be stated concisely, it might be nice to bring it forward, but I like this as a sentence. I'm pretty happy with that edit.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you're welcome, author. We made it better. Okay.
I don't know where we did.
Oh, adult literary. Again, you can tell because there's so many words. Okay. On the shoulder of the bridge stood a little girl that should not have been there, stuck onto the scorched asphalt, smothered by heat, as if God was spinning the earth machine to make her unbreathable cotton candy air. Huh?
So I like the imagery. I like that it's so hot she's stuck to the asphalt. I like that the air has turned to cotton candy because I know what kind of air that is. However, it's too many words. So do your thing.
Okay, here we go.
Do your thing where you do that thing.
So I think I agree with you. This idea that she's stuck on the scorched asphalt is lovely. I think probably the sentence is a different arrangement of these words and losing some of them as well.
It doesn't matter that it's the shoulder of the bridge. She's on an asphalt bridge, right?
Yeah, well, it is kind of weird, right? It matters if it's the shoulder of the bridge because she could be on a pedestrian pathway, like about to leap off.
Right. No, that's true. Yeah, no, then I just had this like, oh my gosh, wait a minute, what's happening on the bridge? Like maybe it's important.
Yeah. I guess I'm still curious because it seems very strange. Oh, I just kicked my table. Oops. It's a strange sort of ethereal vibe, which is good. I think we need to work with these ideas, the shoulder of the bridge, being stuck on the scorched asphalt, and recognize that this is very overwritten.
Yeah.
It's also smothered by, do you think maybe it was supposed to be smothered by heat?
Oh, okay.
That makes sense, right?
Yeah.
I copy paste this, so it's not my error. If anyone's wondering if this was my typo, it was not. I usually try to catch people's typos because I know that mistakes happen, but I must have missed that one because heat is, of course, a word. But I think it was smothered by heat, as if God was spinning the earth. Again, this is lovely. Don't throw it away.
Yeah.
Don't toss it away because you wanted to smush it into a first line.
Yeah. Yeah, you lose it there because I don't know necessarily that you need to spinning the earth machine. Like I don't think you necessarily need that, but I do like that imagery of that's how unbreathable the heat made the air.
Yeah. It requires a lot more unpacking than it's going to get in sentence one. So I would say, author, know when to quit and take the time to make this more elegant. On the shoulder of the bridge. It's weird sometimes to start with a prepositional phrase, right? A prepositional phrase is a preposition is anything the worm can do to the apple, right? On, but, for, nor, or, with, yet are the most common. But on the shoulder of the bridge is so clunky, right? It's a bit of a doorstop right at the start. So I would love to see that just ironed out. Play up the heat, play up that she's stuck, and maybe rethink God as a carnival man. Okay, moving on. Ooh, I forgot an end parenthesis. Sorry, everyone. From where I was, I could see the red and blue flashes of light from the police car parked several streets away.
Okay. So right immediately I say get rid of from where I was.
Thank you. This is filtering for
And
all of our friends out
I
there.
you get rid of I could see, and it's either I saw, or you just
Yep.
take it out altogether and just say the red and blue flashes of light.
Yeah, that's the answer. So I just want to stop and say, filtering language is any language that draws attention to the conventional use of the five senses. So saying like, my eyes saw, right, which is already atrocious for many reasons, but like, I looked and saw, or I looked at such and such, especially in a first person narrative. Your reader is going to always already assume that sensory and expository details that you offer come through the filter of the character's experience. So this is very redundant. No, thank you. The red and blue flashes of light from the police car, you know, were visible, but even that's kind of passive.
Or like, fell over, lit the street.
Yeah. What about like, where are we, right? So red and blue flashes of light from the police car parked several streets away did what?
Illuminated, illuminated the pedestrian crosswalk or whatever it is, because you're going to do something. But
right. Or like threw a shadow on my wall, or like, well, yeah, not waking up, because we all know I'm like allergic to waking up in the first line, but something like recenter our protagonist here, right? Yeah. His or her experience of these lights is getting lost, because now the only thing we're left with here are the lights themselves. And so we need a character here to experience these red and blue flashes. And so, is this person walking home from a babysitting gig? Are they supposed to be home and they're not? Do they wonder if it's their house? There's a lot that could be going on here that just isn't happening. So we want to do more there. We're trucking along here, which is good, because we have about 9 minutes to go.
Okay.
Adult historical. I like this one. I'm older than the trees. That's why they doubt me.
Do the trees doubt her?
That's the problem. Also, we don't use hyphens like this. We use an M dash. Oh, I gotta redo the S to make word behave.
Yeah, but my word is a jerk when it comes to M dashes.
Oh, well, I can yell at it for you if you'd like.
Speak sternly to my word, please.
Why the M dash is not part of the QWERTY keyboard is something I will never understand. It's like the most used. It's such a germane part of contemporary prose that to not have it be like as easy to access as a comma.
All those parts. As soon as you said that, everyone's like, hurt.
Yeah, everyone's like, yes, I feel that. This is going to be the start of a revolution. Okay. I also have a big thing about how salsa jars should be bowl shaped. Because why would you open the jar and then you have to pour it in a bowl? Anyway, I don't want to get into it, but that's my other better mousetrap. Yeah, thank you. See, I'm right. These are things you have time to think about as a freelancer. You're just sitting here doing your good work, thinking that salsa jars should be wider at the top and bowl shaped. Duh. Okay. Anyway, I love this the romance of this, right? Mm-hmm. There's something very Joseph Campbell, navel of the world kind of romantic about that I love. But this has a bit of a pickle right here.
Yeah.
Who is they?
It's such a good first line too.
I know.
Other than that.
Yeah, I agree. I just define this for us, and this would be a gold star for me.
Yeah, I like it.
Oh, a short literary. It's another unicorn. I'm not sure whether this is my best apology or my own funeral.
It's hard because you can't, one's a statement and one's an event.
That is true.
So it's a little confusing until you get to the next line.
I wonder if this is gesture, like the apology is a grand gesture maybe, but again, we can't rewrite what's not here. We can't analyze what's not here. I love the juxtaposition of these things, even though they're very unlike. They just don't make, it doesn't make a ton of sense. It feels more like a poem than a line from prose.
I want, because you're wondering to yourself, your own funeral, because you're about to say these words.
It's a bit of a head scratcher. I agree.
But I want to like it.
I also want to like it. I want to like it because this is a risk taker. And I'm attracted to this character, even though we know so little about them.
Yeah.
Because we've introduced character, we've absolutely centralized the subject, and we know that they're in a moment of conflict. And that's very appealing. That appeals to our like better narrative nature that just, we're like heat-seeking story missiles. We're just like looking for that really good story. And so I feel like this, I want to know this rascally person. I don't know. I'm so curious about whoever this is. Yeah. But again, the execution isn't quite nuanced, but it's up there for me. I like it.
I like it too.
I like it. I don't love it. Uh-oh, is this our last one of the day? Oh, it is. Oh, another adult thriller suspense. A bank robber that starts to panic when they hear sirens always fails, which is why Gerard preferred to panic constantly, only a little, but enough to keep the gun he was holding raised. That was funny.
This is really good. But it's too long, I think, because you've got the comma, and then you've got the em dash, and then a comma.
If we could get rid of this, I'm just going to get rid of it for a second.
Okay.
This is a great first sentence.
There we go. The rest of that stuff was throwing me off. Power left.
Also, my friends, a person is who, everything else is that.
We're going to...
A bank robber who starts to panic when they hear sirens always fails, which is why Gerard preferred to panic constantly. This feels, you know what this feels like? Anxious People. Did you read Anxious People by Frederick Bachman?
No.
But I love this boy. It's about a sort of this bank robbery gone awry, and then the bank robber accidentally takes an apartment full of people hostage. They're there for an apartment viewing, and then they all end up being held hostage by this really incompetent bank robber. And it's wonderful. It's just fantastic. It was definitely one of my favorite books that I read last year. So it's a little funny, and it has a ton of personality.
Yeah.
I love it. I would love it my way. That's the problem is this is the sentence, but I like my version of it.
Yeah. Yeah, they should have stopped. Yeah. And then
quit while you're ahead, my friends. This is the other theme of the day. Just stop eventually, like the value of silence. You gotta end the sentence.
But that's another sentence that I think probably if they had read it out loud to themselves, they would have been like, more words. Okay, and gone back and maybe done that themselves.
I agree, because this is, preferred to panic constantly. His anxiety was low level enough to keep the gun raised without leaving him paralyzed. That's a great second sentence, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's trying to do everything all at once. And then you end up really undermining the authority of what is a pretty good quality sentence.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I banged my fist with emphasis. Okay. So we have to pick a favorite. I'm going to spin you back to me, which is always disconcerting. So I warn you always that my face is coming. Here it is. Oh, I'm back.
Oh, hello.
Did you miss me? Yeah. So we have to pick a fave. I have to say, this crop of lines, I don't know that there was just a runaway winner for me. I liked our version of a lot of the lines.
Yes. And I think there's a lot of potential, and I'm really happy. I don't know if anything I said was helpful at all.
It was. So what was your favorite? Someone has to win the book.
My favorite that wasn't adapted by us. I mean, my favorite that we adapted was It Smells Like Burbank.
Oh yeah, you like that one a lot. I would say my favorite one that we adapted was the last one.
Okay.
But again, because I have like nostalgia and great affection for Anxious People, and so I'm just like giving them the benefit of the doubt that I'll like the rest of their book. But I think I know what you're going to say. Okay.
Okay, I'm going to say
your favorite.
The first one.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew when we read it that it was going to be, I think I knew when we read it.
Yeah.
I agree. I was a good girl except when I couldn't keep the monsters quiet. There's some menace, like some very menacing, like a looming, like terrible something.
And if there's nothing, it doesn't say terrible, it doesn't say frightening, it doesn't use any of those words. It makes you feel that way without telling you that you're going to feel that way. My phone is like starting to fade you out, I think, to save battery. They only have a limited charge.
Phone, please. Okay, so I will be getting in touch with the author of line number 64, the first one from today. Before we go, I wanted to share, I did a mini first line frenzy on A Perfect Equation on my feed. I think it went up when I announced this. It was very positive. But I wanted to share my favorite line of the whole book. Well, my favorite lines, really. I think they captured something about being a romance reader, and I felt like the last third of the book in many ways was an homage to romance readers and our perpetual optimism. And so this is the line. This is from, what's going on? I don't want to give anything away, but this is from the protagonist, Letty. And she says, I believe in mathematics. I believe in the scientific laws governing our universe and the infinite equations that allow humans to find a way together. I believe mistakes can be mended, grudges can be reconciled, mysteries solved, and happy endings can come to each of us. And I thought that was like the absolute most perfect, that's your average romance reader. Very smart, extremely compelled by the real world, but also never afraid to. The bravery of hope for something better, I think, is something that really shines in this book. And I think all of you out there should read it. Don't miss the first one. A Lady's Formula for Love was fantastic. I loved that too. So this is the second book in the Secret Scientists of London series. And you will absolutely want to find the nearest underground secret society for lady scientists in your city. They wouldn't accept me because I can't do math, but I would hang out outside.
I would be their friends. Yeah, I can't do math either. My dogs come to visit me, so we can visit quietly.
Nice. Okay. Your dog's been very good today. And Prim, my cat, who usually people know is like trying to eat my face during these broadcasts because she doesn't like when I talk too quickly. She's taking her like second morning nap, so she's been fully engaged this whole time.
Girl, thank you for having me so much. This was
Thanks for coming.
I felt a lot of pressure, but I think I'm
you did great. You're not supposed to feel pressure. The authors are supposed to have panic attacks, but you are supposed to feel very in control about all of this. So I'll have to tweak my methodology.
I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. I want everyone to know that I have so much admiration for anyone and just so much support and so much consideration for anyone who is brave enough to put their writing out there. So many of us keep our writing to ourselves because we're just afraid that it's not good enough or afraid that people won't understand what we're trying to say. So any author that puts their work out there deserves a standing ovation. And anyone who does it and works really hard to try and get better at it deserves even more admiration. And anyone who actually finishes a book, when I do reviews, I don't ever give anything less than a 5-star because you wrote a book. It's really hard.
A for effort, no matter what. You got there in the end. I am not quite as forgiving in my reviews, unfortunately. I don't know that anyone would want me to edit their books if I liked all books. But I think, number one, I'm glad you had fun. First Line Frenzy is what I call an ongoing community learning project. And I've been doing it for about 6 years because I do believe that writers need a free platform to get, qualified feedback, not just from friends and family who are trying to preserve their feelings, but the objectivity is a compassionate gift. And objectivity doesn't just mean we look at a thing as if it's not part of us, but it really means bringing our compassion to the table and saying, what is the intention of this thing and how does it fulfill that intention, and how can we bridge the gap between those two spaces? And that's sort of what I always look at as my purpose, is not to turn someone else's work into the book I would have written or make them say it how I would have, but just to say, what were you trying to do here, and how much closer can we get to that? Or are we there? Are we there? Yeah. And so lots of bravery. It's why we do it anonymously, so that people can enjoy and not be anxious. But I love this. I'm literally could not do it without the people who send in their lines and watch and participate. So thank you to everybody. And especially thank you to you, Elizabeth. I can't wait for the next one. No pressure.
I just turned in revisions for the next one. And let me tell you guys, everyone who's writing a romance during a pandemic, you are amazing, because it's really hard. It's really hard to write. And I do believe in the power of love to change the world. And I do believe that romance is an important genre. And I do love romance novels. And I do think that they're denigrated and berated because of a lot of really terrible internalized misogyny. But it is really hard to write about something that pure and wonderful when there's a garbage fire raging outside your door. So yeah, I don't know. Book 3, we'll see. We talk a lot about birth control in book 3. Just
yes, okay. I'm ready.
A little bit inspired by the fact that my children would not leave me alone because they were housebound with me, and I thought
the fact that that's the reason that there's birth control in book 3 is the best reason. How are your kids young? Are they
they're older. They're older.
Yeah. We'll see what this pandemic raised generation is going to be like. They really want us to entertain them a lot, which is not my favorite thing. So I think my most oft used parenting phrase during the pandemic was, that sounds like a you problem. But we'll see. We'll see how they turn out. I'll let you know.
So much. And I write in the kitchen too. Okay. And actually, so were they all teenagers at the time, or 2 were teenagers at the time?
Ooh.
It first started? Yeah. And so every 5 minutes, mom is trying to write a scene, a little steam, opens the fridge. Is there anything in here, Ma? I'm
hungry.
But they always want to eat. About birth control. I was like, and then she decided not to have any kids.
My son for a while had a phase where he loved to play the game of life, and would always be like, Mom, why do you always choose the no kids path? And I was like, because in the game of life, on this game board, I'm going to retire very wealthy on this island by myself. And he's like, I don't know. I think kids are great. And I'm like, do you? So, I get it. I do.
With my original bra size, too. That's what
my original everything size.
Oh, my God.
Oh, no. We've gone off the rails. It's gotten wild. Okay. All right. Well, this will be posted to my page, my video page, and I also just set up a YouTube channel for all of these to be available to non-Instagram users, which frankly was hours of my life that I will never get back. So tell your friends who aren't on Instagram to look on YouTube for First Line Frenzy. The lines we looked at today will be available for you to look at in my newsletter, which goes out every Friday morning. It's called Reading and Writing with Rebecca, and it is adorable. So you can find out information about all of that on my Instagram page. Again, Elizabeth, thank you so much. This is delightful. You are delightful, and I hope you'll come back.
Thanks so much. I would love to, now that I know what to expect. Very excited.
All right. Well, yeah, no, don't be afraid. You are the big bad wolf here. There's nothing to be afraid of. All right. Be well. Good luck with all the reviews in book 3. We can't wait to read it.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.